So, can you see the screen is the question. Cool, because all I see is a big white box, which makes me a little nervous. Well, again, I'm Tim Goldstein. What we're really going to be taking a look at is supporting the neurodistinct for success, and really looking at it from a little different light. Instead of looking at it as just being an ADA process, looking at it as being more of a holistic process of supporting all of neurodiversity, which means even those that aren't neurodistinct. I think everybody could sometimes use a little bit of extra support. So we'll look at a few different things here. So neurodistinct, I like to say that, thinking different is not a disability. I know medically it does consider a disability, but those of us in the community tend to not think of ourselves very often as being disabled. We just think of ourselves as looking at the world a little bit differently. So success factors is an idea of a different way to support the neurodistinct by making things easily available instead of making them big, long, drawn-out processes. So when I talk about neurodistinct, this is just a quick little how I use it in terminology. To me, I use the idea of the neurocloud, and the neurocloud is all humans. You cannot be human and get outside of the neurocloud. And then we have neurotypicals. You can see in the kind of top left, the little blue line around them. And neurotypicals tend to, in all different human traits, be a little more consistent in those traits, let's say. Whereas the neurodistinct, the rest of the picture, tend to have a lot more spikiness or variation in them. Some things very, very strong, but some things very, very weak in them, which doesn't make them better or worse. Sometimes it gives advantages, sometimes it gives challenges. And to me, the definition between the two is the neurodistinct perceive, process, and think differently than the neurotypicals, which is why it makes them distinct, because they think differently, distinctly. And all human traits. I don't like to think of as being autistic traits or ADHD traits, because we see those same traits maybe at different intensities, but we see them throughout all humans. So the idea is in success factors that we want to enable success. We aren't out to treat disabilities. Not that there's anything wrong with treating disabilities. When we want to treat disabilities, there's this whole culture that you're all in called the medical culture. And it is doing a pretty darn good job at taking care of disabilities. But when we look at it as being workers, I don't look at needing some help to make me more successful as a worker as treating me as disabled. It's really accepting that in my culture, which is the autistic culture, we have some different ways that we see things, that we perceive, that we communicate. And like with any culture, we have to give a little bit, and we also want the other cultures to give a little bit to us. And to me, that is really what success factors are. The idea that you shouldn't have to have a diagnosis in order to get support to be at your best performance, your best worker that you can be. So while this is oriented towards the neurodistinct, the reality is this is an idea that should fit across the boards for everybody. So when we look at the ADA process, ADA is most of you are probably pretty familiar with it. It's a legal binding law. And the ADA means there is legal compliance, that employers have to give reasonable accommodations to people who are disabled, and disability is very broadly defined in ADA. It's defined as being something that materially impacts a major area of your life. So lots of things that we don't even think of as disabilities could fall easily under ADA. And the general process in ADA is, starting at the left, first you have to disclose that you have one of these disabilities. And the problem is a lot of people don't want to disclose. It's scary to disclose. You think if I go tell HR, which is usually how accommodations come about, that I have fill in the blank, it's going to reflect negatively on me. So we first have this challenge of you got to come out and disclose. Secondly, you've got to have a disability. You can't ask for an accommodation under ADA if there is no disability. So that's the first step. The next step is there's always paperwork. Any federal law, there's going to be paperwork involved somewhere along the way. So you fill out this paperwork, and eventually you get a form to go and take to your doctor or your therapist if you're in the neurodistinct category. And you have to have the doctor put down what it is that is going to be the accommodation that's going to help you. And in my personal experience, and from talking to many others, you go to your doctor and you say, will you fill out this form for me? And they say, gladly, but what do you need? Because they don't know what you need at work. They can be the world's best clinician that there is, but they're not with you every day, every moment, knowing the challenges that you're dealing with. So what do? They say, tell me what you need and I'll put it down for you. Kind of crazy, isn't it? We got to have a doctor sign for what it is we tell them that we need to make us successful. Now we get that form and we take it off to somebody in accommodations, which is usually the HR department. And they have to decide, is this a reasonable accommodation or not a reasonable accommodation? So when you start into this process, you can go through the scary part of disclosing, go through the trouble of having to bug your doctor to fill out this form that you're going to tell them what to put down anyways, and then get turned down at the end, which is kind of a discouraging approach to doing things. But that's not to say ADA is bad. The ADA does give legal rights, and if you're working with a employer that is not willing to offer an accommodation that you fully feel is justified and is reasonable, it gives you a framework and a process to work through to get that actually looked at and considered seriously. So I'm not saying to throw out ADA. What I'm really saying is a lot of things I think we need aren't that big that we should have to go through this difficult a process. But it is an important process to have around when it's something that is a little bit more major that you need to make you most successful. You've probably all seen this kind of picture. It's often used in the whole idea of equity versus equality. And what we're looking at here is simply this idea that in general, most employers will give everybody that does a particular role, they'll give them the exact same tools. So here we have people that are all different. We have big people, we have female, we have male that's really tall, we have somebody that is a wheelchair user. But we give them all exactly the same bicycle. And it's not very efficient because we haven't given the right tool to the right person. So just think of it in your roles. My guess is if you're, doing role X, a speech pathologist, or, fill in that with blank or whatever, you get the same set of tools that the other ones get, whether that's the toolbox you need or not the toolbox you need, that's the toolbox you get. So the whole idea is that we should really look at doing something more like this, which is giving the appropriate tools to the appropriate people. And here, of course, we're giving the little bicycle to the small person so that they can fit it comfortably. And going through, and the tall person has a bigger bicycle. The person that's a wheelchair user has a hand crank bicycle so that they can maneuver it and get around. So, the thought here is, why do we give the same toolbox to everybody that does the same role, even though we're all individuals, we're all unique, and we likely all need a little bit different set of tools to do our role the absolute best that our role can be done by us. So that really comes up with an idea of just looking at, if we take, these are some things that I think are common things that people need. We take the person in the top. They're sitting at a desk that's set up for a right-handed person. The mouse is on the right, the phone's on the right. You can see they've got a little notepad or portfolio or something sitting, behind the phone on the right. And the way that they're twisted around on the desk, you're kind of guessing there's no room left on the left. If they were left-handed, should we have to go through an ADA process to get somebody to change the desk to be set up for a left-handed person? It doesn't make much sense. So why do we have to go through the same problem of, very often for neurodistinct individuals, things such as an agenda in a meetings? will make all the difference in the world because they now know how to prepare, they know what to expect, and they will perform better. So why, to ask for an agenda at a meeting, should we have to go through an ADA process when it's been proven everybody performs better if you put an agenda at a meeting? Why don't we just make that something that somebody can say, hey, can we have an agenda at this meeting all the time, instead of having to go through a process for it? And the one on the bottom right, that one I just think is kind of cute. I'm not suggesting that you pass notes, but that can be fun at times. But really, just dealing with communication. We all have different communication styles. So maybe what you need is you need the person that's asking you to do something to put it down in writing, send you an email on it, because that just works better, allows you to organize better, and allows you to look back and make sure that you're remembering what the right thing was that they asked you to do. Why should that have to be an ADA accommodation? All of these are things that cost virtually nothing, but can make big, big performance differences for individuals. So that's the idea of success factors. Is there's lots of these things that really all humans can benefit from, but the neurodistinct even more so. And why do we make barriers to have them? So I think what we should really do is, if you look on the left-hand side, the little checkbox with the checklist, the idea being, why don't we have pre-approved things that you can just ask for and say, hey, I need this. It's already been approved. You don't have to disclose. You don't have to say why you need that. You just have to say, agenda in meetings is something that is super helpful for me. And you can request agenda at meetings, and you don't need approval from somebody to say, hey, an agenda at the meeting would be super helpful for me to perform well at the meeting. To get a good idea of some different ideas and tips that you can go look at, if you're not familiar with the Job Accommodation Network, it's some branch of the government that actually maintains it. And the website is askjan.org. So askjan.org. And I will share this deck afterwards so that it can circulate around so you can get the website. Don't worry about having to write it down now. And when you go to askjan.org, you will see up in the top, amongst all the various things you can pick, there it says A-Z. Click on A-Z and you will get a list of all different conditions that could potentially fall under ADA. Click on one of the conditions, and then you will get a list of, either by role or by kind of the need of what it may be, what are some things that have proven to be successful for some individuals. And many of them cost nothing. They could be things that can be applied to anybody. If you click the autism one, I'm fairly familiar with that one. It goes in, and if you look at it by challenge, well, it has things such as executive function challenges, anxiety challenges. And then when you click that, it will then give you a list of a variety of potential things that could be done to possibly, reduce or eliminate that challenge. So great resource to come up with a big list like that. This is a list of just some ideas, and I have to thank Brian for helping, A, the idea of actually putting the list into the slides, and B, giving some really good ideas for the list. And I broke it down, though. I think we have really two pieces in the list. There's organizational things that the organization would have to do and everybody would get, a sensory or stim room, somewhere maybe you need just to cool down, calm down, and there's too much noise, or maybe you need to go out and blow off some steam. So you need a place that the noise won't get out of. Neurodistinct mentor program. That's another thing that not that hard to find people who are willing to talk to others that have a condition that they have, and just give them somebody to talk to, give them a different perspective on how maybe they can overcome it. I'm not going to read them all. Again, I'll share the list. But the important thing is this is by no means, exhaustive. There's question marks at the bottom because you need to fill in ones that would be appropriate for your own uses and for your own organization. Then on the individual side, neurodiversity job coaches are one potential idea. Something like written instructions, being able to say, hey, I need the instructions in writing because I can't remember all the details you told me if you don't write it down. So again, this gives you a little idea of what I mean by success factors of things that should be pre-approved, so anybody can ask for them without saying, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, I have whatever. You can just say, I would be a much better employee if I had a written instruction for doing the things that you request of me that are not the standard everyday things I do in my role. And that is it.